Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Today is 8th of August, it's Saturday, and we're doing our 14th episode of Do It Live. This is our 14th episode of Live Chat. My name is Algirdas Matonizz, also known as Matonizz. This is my co-host Michael Ding Dingfelder. And we're welcoming everyone to the stream today. We're going to be talking through some questions. Since last couple of streams, we spent a little bit more time reviewing some of the footages, and we didn't have time to necessarily spend too much time answering your live questions and from emails and etc. So we're going to be spending a little bit more time with your questions. Quick household notes before we get into that. Please do us a big favor and give this video a like, subscribe, hit notification bell if you haven't already. And if you have any questions, please leave them in a chat box. Ideally, put some question marks at the end of your question, so it will be easier for me to spot. But today, I have a feeling I'll have pretty good clue of how many questions we're getting, because I'm going to be keeping track of that. That being said, Mike, how are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good.
Okay.
Thanks for having me.
Okay. Hello, Brazil.
Oh, I have to say hi to Brazil, too. If there's any Brazilians here, hello to you.
Okay, so for those who have seen our streams previously, we're going to do a little giveaway later on. So watch for that. But in the meantime, I'll just remind, while people are still joining in, that leave your questions in the chat. And then we're going to be spending some time, a good amount of time answering your questions, both from social media, emails, and etc. So that being said, how was the recording session today? You didn't seem very thrilled when I gave you a call asking to do some trombone recordings. People keep on asking whether I or you can play trombone. I guess they're going to be able to figure that out tomorrow. No, it's not tomorrow. It's Monday. It's going to be on Monday, whether one of us can play trombone. A little spoiler alert here, but you were recording some trombone.
You think you're going to actually get it all together for Monday? Or
No, that's the plan. Also, just please give us a thumbs up in the chat if you're hearing audio well. I think the audio should be a little bit higher level this time, so let us know by giving a thumbs up if the audio is fine. But yeah, how was the trombone and baritone recording session today?
I mean, it was okay. I mean, I had to go back and do a couple of things, but because of the way that it was recorded and the way the music was written, but it got done. So hopefully there's some good takes in there that you can use for the song that you're putting together.
So I'm seeing some thumbs up. Thanks a lot to everyone who's giving us a notice. I see Ellen joining in. Say hello to Ellen.
Oh, hi, Ellen.
I don't think she missed that. I don't think she missed a single stream.
I know she's like one of our most faithful viewers. That's awesome.
Yeah. Okay. So before we get into the question, there's just a few topics that I wanted to talk through with you, and we touched briefly about, by the time we talked about this, there wasn't all that much information about this, but it's becoming a little bit more relevant as August slowly but surely going towards the second half, and the September is going to come in, and obviously school year is going to start. So we had this chat a little bit about, since you're a band director, about the upcoming year, school year, which is going to be half virtual, half in person, and how you're going to be approaching, and what adjustments people should be expecting. So I find it, because I teach quite a few students from other states, and it seems like there's a lack of information and clarity to what the plan is with larger ensembles, smaller ensembles, one-on-one lessons. And I was hoping maybe you could give us all a little bit of insight, if you can, from whatever you have. What's the plan, at least with your school? How are you going to be solving some of these issues, and how are you going to be approaching teaching instruments like brass, which is obviously we use air, and so that's a relevant topic. So any thoughts on this, or anything you
Sure. Yeah, I still have a few weeks before I have to go back and and start the school year. But the plans are still coming together as we speak. I wouldn't necessarily say they're completely finalized at this point, at least for our school district. But we are keeping moving on putting things into place and adjusting things as we need to. Where it's set up now is I teach 5th through 7th grade, and I have various music courses that I do teach. But for the kindergartners through 5th grade, they're going to come in every day. The teachers will have to report to each one of the students' classrooms, so that the students won't be changing teachers and moving to different places. It'll be the teachers that are going to the students to teach whatever courses they might have to teach. For the 6th through 12th graders, they're going to go on a rotating schedule where we'll have one set of students one day, and then the following day it'll be a different grouping of students. So that's how they're breaking it up with that. As for the band students, that's one of my biggest concerns, because the majority of my day is teaching either 5th grade band or 6th grade band, or doing the lessons that go along with that. I have a actual band class that I teach, and then I have small group lessons of various instruments, and that's the majority of what my day is. As of right now, there were some studies that were released within the past couple of days. I had a chance to look at that a little bit, about recommending bell covers and covering up the instruments and playing with actual masks on, with openings in them. Recommending the performing and playing outside, and of course with a certain amount of distance that's in between each player. They also recommend the allowing time for the air to be filtered out of the room before the next grouping of students would come in. So those are all some of the things that I'm considering in working with my school, is trying to see if we can't meet inside of the school building, can we set up some tents or some structures that are outside, so that the students can go and we can perform in more of an open air environment. I'm still talking and considering how many people we could have in the room, how much distance we need to have between the students, what types of coverings we might need to cover the instruments, and those sorts of things. So it's I wouldn't say it's 100% set, but we're considering many different things that we can do, and we're continuing to work out a plan.
And in regards to filtering air, what does that mean? What is that? Is it as simple as opening the windows, or are there some sort of special procedures in regards to filtering air?
Yeah, I mean, there's different types of, depending on what school building you have. They're talking about like the different ventilation systems that are in there that could clear a certain amount of air. There's also, opening the windows and letting fresh air in. Obviously, that's ideal to let the fresh air come in. Depending on how good the filtration system is to the systems that are in various schools, it may or may not be able to handle filtering the air as quickly. So it's just so many variables.
And is the state or anyone providing the school guidelines in terms of all these? Obviously, we know 6 feet apart, but it's I guess it's going to be different for brass musicians, or and also you need to make sure that it's not only safe, but it's functional. You need to hear how.
The funny thing about it is in the study that I read, everyone should stay 6 feet apart, but except for the trombone players, they have to. I believe that the distance is 9 feet, which isn't a bad idea. I mean, you should at least keep 9 feet away from a trombone player at all times.
I guess it's
not even if there's a pandemic or a disease that's going through. You should stay a minimum of 20 to 30 feet from all trombone players at all times.
I guess do you have to stay away from the front of the bow, or just surrounding area? 9 feet, because imagine putting a trombone section 9 feet apart. That's not even like how are you gonna be?
Yeah, that's a good question.
It's not even doable.
What my thoughts would be is probably be 9 feet away from mainly where the bell is projecting the air.
So they're just letting you guys figure this out instead of.
Pennsylvania, they mentioned about keeping 6 feet of space when that is possible. So I wouldn't even say there is a guideline. They're just saying, hey, if it's possible to keep people and students 6 feet apart, then go ahead and do that. But there's no strict rule as how it was stated.
Because we are going to be playing a gala concert, streaming a gala concert on 28th, and we're getting bell covers. And I hear, I haven't tried one myself, but I hear a variety of opinions in terms of how it affects intonation and sensation you get while playing. I'm curious how that's going to work.
I saw some ones too of some of these professionals, and they were doing this study, and they're covering like a clarinet, for example, where the person can put their hands inside of almost what looks like this bag, to where like the mouthpiece will be sticking out of the bag, and like the bell, I think I can't remember if it was covered or not, but their hands would go inside. I know that's a tough thing especially when I teach younger students. You want to make sure you know where their fingers are going and what they're pressing down, and are they covering things correctly, and so on and so forth. But if we have to have the students covering their hands in the instrument in the bag, for example, for like a saxophone or a flute or a clarinet or any instrument, it's going to be a lot trickier you'd really have to use your ear to hear, instead of looking and saying, oh, they're not covering this key or things like that.
And I've heard a rumor, and I don't know whether you can elaborate on this, or maybe you can't. If not, no big deal. But there is a rumor that there might be a increased number of percussion players versus brass players, just because it's obviously logistically you don't need to be worried about air transmitting as much with percussion, etc. Is that something of a concern of maybe the new students that you're about to teach? They have to start on a percussion instrument rather than brass?
Yeah, I think I got the most of your question. I don't know if there was like a glitch that happened a few seconds ago, but if I understand the question correctly, it's possible that there could be more students that are interested in doing drums instead of a wind instrument. I know if things get out of hand, and it would make my ensemble really unbalanced, where there would be 6 flute players and 30 drummers, then that's going to just be a terrible balance. I mean, you would either have to do an audition, or you would have to just make certain requirements to get in the percussion section. I think at that point, you wouldn't want to have so many of one particular instrument.
Okay, got it. Well, thanks for shedding some light. Is there anything else you feel worth knowing for students who are tuning in? Because again, I spoke with a couple of my students who are talking about range of 12 to 16, and it seems that the lack of information is a little bit mind-boggling, and you cannot blame the teachers, because there's an overall. I find that what I'm hearing from you right now is that the fact that you're supposed to be reading studies and figuring this out seems a little crazy to me, with all honesty. But
I mean, when it comes down to it, as an educator, your primary concern is making sure that you have that your students are safe in your classroom. I mean, I almost see the teaching aspect is secondary. I mean, you need to make sure that your kids are safe, and that's why we always have different drills and emergency drills and things like that. And this is no different. I mean, you want to make sure that the kids are safe. But the best advice that I could give, and sort of how I'm approaching this, is just go with the flow. I mean, at this point in where we are with things. You might not be able to have an exact plan with things, or that plan that you do have might change very rapidly in one direction or another. And you just have to be able to go with the flow and adjust to, what's taking place. So, if I was a young kid, I mean, it could be disappointing if you might not be able to play, or if you have to play with certain restrictions and things like that. But, eventually this will pass, and we'll get back to sort of a more normal time. So just sort of hang in there until things can get better.
Hopefully. Well, again, thanks a lot for shedding some light on this. I feel like this is relevant information. I was curious myself as well. And that being said, let's move on to some questions. I'm seeing some good questions in the chat. We're going to try and answer all of them if possible. Keep them coming. Please put a question mark at the end if possible. That'll make it a little bit easier for me to locate the questions. But I'm seeing some good questions. I'm going to try and answer as many as possible. But before we go to live questions, I've got a couple of them who came in through emails and from our patrons. So one of the questions from our patron George is asking, can you briefly explain to me the difference between compensating and non-compensating euphoniums, and is my Yamaha free valve Ep.14 compensating or non-compensating? So here's the deal. 99% of euphoniums, and I'm saying 99 because I've only seen once in my life and it was custom made, free valve euphoniums are going to be non-compensating. So I've seen one of them, which I'll bring on one of these live streams at some point, which is a Best and New Standard, which is originally supposed to be a 4-valve instrument, but for some reason somebody made a custom order to make it a free valve compensating euphonium. But normally if you see a free valve euphonium, it's a non-compensating, and the YP201 is for sure a non-compensating euphonium. Now you would see 4-valve instruments that are still not compensating, and normally if the 4th valve is on the top, again 99, and I'm saying that because I've never seen a compensating euphonium with a 4th valve on the same line like the main 3 valves, but I've never seen one with 3 valves that will be compensating up until recently. So vast majority of times that'll be a non-compensating euphonium. Now sometimes you would see a 4th valve on a side like my euphoniums that I have there. That's likely to be a compensating euphonium, but does not necessarily always have to be. So how do you know which one's compensating and which one's not? And you have to look at the length of the valve tube. So if you look, I took out 2 valves, one of them from compensating and one of them from non-compensating euphonium. Both of them have 4 valves placed in the same way. Now you notice that the compensating valve, which is right here, it has some extra holes or extra space for extra tubing to come in and come out, versus a non-compensating euphonium, which is a shorter valve and it has less holes for less tubings to come in and come out. And basically the whole idea behind the compensating and non-compensating euphoniums was to improve the intonation in the bottom register, where you use the combinations that require 4th valve and to replace your combinations like 1 and 3. So it's a very relevant thing in the bottom register. Now that being said, with all honesty, most of the new top line euphoniums that I try actually have some of the combinations like low C, which I'm used to using 4 and none of the top valves. They have them flat nowadays, and I've noticed that tendency with a lot of my students as well, where I actually suggest using 1 and 3 for some of those notes and the low F and etc. So but it's supposed to really help out with some really low notes. So that would be the main difference between compensating and non-compensating euphoniums. Is there anything you'd like to add to this that I forgot to mention? Or
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned a lot about the difference there, but in a nutshell is that for some of the sounds that we have to play on the instrument, they're just a little bit too sharp, and there's not enough tubing on the slides to get those sounds in tune. So the compensating system, whenever you activate the valves, especially the 4th valve, it's going to redirect the air through those longer tubes and the additional added tubing to correct the pitch to make it more in tune.
See one of our patrons, Mark, joining in. Give a shout out to Mark.
Mark.
Okay, so another question is coming from Luan. What band do you work in? It's one of the best wind ensembles I've ever heard. So we work at the River City Brass Band. That's the band we're in. It's not exactly a wind band. In fact, it's a brass band. It doesn't have any wind instruments. I guess in States sometimes people refer to winds as brass and woodwinds, but it's not a wind ensemble. It's a brass band. It's 28 players, free percussion, 25 brass players. It's the River City Brass Band, and it's a pretty unique ensemble in United States. It's like a traditional British brass band, except for we use French horns instead of our tenor horns. One more question coming from Ril. I was wondering if there are any tips on how to count in my head while playing music. I can't count during my warm-ups, but it gets hard when I subdivide while playing actual music. Should I think consciously while playing? And I wanted to add this question because that's actually been a very relevant topic recently with even some of my online students. I had one student in which we had quite a lot of trouble. He was guessing a lot of rhythms, and I could not make him count. We did a lot of counting outside of playing, but as soon as he would grab the instrument, he would just guess the rhythm. He would stop counting, and basically we trained how to prioritize rhythm. So you always have to focus on one main thing, and I asked him to stop focusing as much on the pitch, because you have to practice the piece so much that the pitch is a secondary. You just have it in your head, and really focus on the rhythms. Rhythms is the most important thing, just because correct pitch at the wrong time is the wrong pitch. So basically my biggest advice was to really prioritize counting instead of pitch and all that technique, all the playing technique, just to get used to that. And now the more you do that, the easier it becomes to multitask. But since I assume that's one of your fortes in band playing, is there any specific methods and or anything that you would suggest that would help out with ability to multitask and be able to count while playing, not just outside?
Yeah, whenever I think about that, and with subdivision and what do you think and how do you approach it, and especially when you're playing music, when you asked me this question just a few seconds ago, I automatically thought back to my private teacher that I had in high school. His name was Mr. Voldyne, and it really comes down to how good you are with the beat or understanding the beat, because subdivisions are just going to be dividing up what that beat is. But even just basic learning and keeping and following the steady beat, working with a metronome constantly. I mean, how often do you work with a metronome whenever you're practicing and playing things? It's like a part of you, you know. It's such an important device to play along with. But back whenever I was with my teacher, you know, he would have me sit whenever I was young, and he would have me tap out the beat with my foot. And it was just amazing how crazy wrong I was with the beat and foot tapping, and how it just wouldn't match up, because it's like you don't have control of your body whenever you're playing. But of course, as you get better and you learn, you get much more comfortable with that. And there would be a point in time where he would put his foot down on top of mine just so that it wouldn't come on the offbeat when it should be on the downbeat, and things like that, until we really started to work it out. And then just think about dividing the beat from the strong downbeat that you have, and then the upbeat with your foot coming up. And once you start to really develop that in the basic parts of the beat, the down and the upbeat, you can start to break it down even further with other types of subdivisions. But you really need to get very comfortable with that beat. There's not you can't just get all the way to the end, and you can't just be a pro with, you know, subdividing 16th notes when you have a hard time feeling and understanding, you know, the the downbeat and the upbeat, or the half of beats, if you want to think of it that way. But whenever I had so much development in that, it just becomes a part of you. And whenever you were talking about thinking other things being secondary, I agree with that. And I say this quite a bit. I always say that whenever I go to play a sound, whatever it may be, I mean, my fingers know where they need to go, and my body knows how those sounds feel. Like, even before I play those sounds, my body knows what it needs to do with air support, lip pressure, flexibility, mouth cavity. It knows what it needs to do. So I know I'm going to hit the right sound most of the time whenever I'm going to play something. So because I'm so comfortable with that, I can really focus on the mathematics and the beat, and it's to a point now where I don't tap my foot anymore or anything like that.
Congratulations. Congratulations. You made it.
Yes.
Made it to the big leagues.
Yeah. I rarely ever tap my foot whenever I'm playing, but inside of me, and especially inside of my mind, I have very advanced types of countings and things like that is going through pretty much constantly. And it's amazing with music how much you can do. You would surprise yourself at how much your mind can multitask with all of the different aspects of music taking place at one time. And you can do so many things. So when I'm thinking about all these advanced subdivisions and breaking things down, I'm not thinking about other things. I'm sort of having things go on autopilot. But you have to have a good foundation of all of those other things, or it's really hard to do.
Yeah, and you know what? Even with really good players who've seen those rhythms, but they're kind of they're not really actively counting in your head, but they're more or less playing the right rhythm. You can really, really, really clearly feel when you're playing next to somebody who's subdividing. And I don't know whether that's your experience, but if I sit to somebody who's good, but just doing that, not without necessarily counting, but just doing it unconsciously, the rhythms, just because you've seen the looks, and even though he or she might be playing the rhythms okay, but that specific precision with somebody who's constantly subdividing, counting, you can instantly feel that whenever you sit down. It's so much easier to match somebody who's constantly subdividing. So that's one of the priorities I always do as well. On top of following conductor, that would be another big one, because you can subdivide all you want, but if you don't know what you're trying to subdivide, what tempo you're trying to subdivide, that's a problem. But it's always just I find that personally that normally with younger kids, it's getting that first correct time where you're counting correctly and playing first repetition, and once you get it once correctly, you can start bumping the tempo really rapidly, just getting that first correct time where you're counting and playing, and start realizing that beat. And after that, normally becomes much more of a pleasant process, because I guess boredom is not a concern for you when you practice. I don't think you probably think about I'm being bored or this is boring, but I guess that seems to be a tendency with younger students. You find practicing rhythms not particularly the most interesting thing to do. So it's I'm always curious to finding the more interesting ways, and while still being productive, not going too much outside the topic. So
just to mention one more time about the metronome being so important with beat development, and especially working on with subdivisions. Get one of those devices. They come in different shapes and forms and things like that. They're on, there's apps and things like that are available and free and things like that. If you're doing a practice session, you should almost always be working with that metronome and having it on. And you could always put it into a different level of things. Like if you're doing an exercise where you're just playing a quarter note scale, instead of just having it on the steady beat, 1, 2, 3, and 4, break it down to where the metronome is having the eighth note subdivision, where you'll get that feeling of 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and even throw it on 16ths, 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and just keep that going as you're doing your practicing, because eventually that'll start to transfer over, and instead of the metronome going 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and your body and inside and your mind is going to be doing that.
Now, if you have to guesstimate, what percentage of your practice is being done with metronome versus not? If you had to guesstimate, just give a rough ball. What would you say? I'm just curious.
Probably the only time when I don't is whenever I'm playing a type of figure where I have to slow down or speed up or something like that in the moment. Like if I have an accelerando or a rallentando or something like that, that is probably some of the only time where I don't have the metronome. Sometimes when I'm warming up and I'm doing, depending, like if I'm doing long tones or something like that, I might not have the metronome on at that point, unless I want to judge how far I can hold out to the sound at what speed and tempo. But I'm pretty much using it almost at all times.
Would it be fair to say like 95% of the time, metronome?
I would say 96% of the time, if I want to be
more accurate.
Accurate,
okay.
Yes.
Fair enough. That sounds pretty pretty accurate to me.
I just want to disagree with you. I will say 97% of the time.
What would you say to? And actually, I used to have a professor in my undergraduate. I'm not gonna necessarily mention the name. He was big on not practicing too much with metronome, because the claim was if you're used to hearing the metronome, you might lose your inner pulse. What would you say to that? I'm just curious.
I mean,
exactly.
the only thing that I would say about doing a metronome too much and things like that would be maybe if you did a metronome so much that you didn't have the flexibility to be more musical in certain ways. Like I had mentioned, if you have to slow down or you have to speed up or you have to hold just slightly a little bit extra onto a sound, maybe it can affect things like that. But I've never had any issue of being dead on with the time if I'm on a metronome, and then whenever I need to play something more expressive or hold things out a little bit more, I've never had an issue with that. I mean, I don't know if I agree or disagree with. I mean, yeah, you need an internal pulse and things like that, but the metronome helps to give you that internal pulse, and you're still going to need it, but I mean, you don't necessarily need a metronome your whole life. You'll start to develop more of that sense of an internal pulse. So I kind of see where the teacher is coming from. Don't know if I agree or disagree 100%, but it just depends on the application of that comment that you said.
Fair enough. I would personally disagree with that a lot. I'm going to be a little bit more opinionated on this, and especially just because we have to breathe. And normally, my experience as well, for people who don't use metronome often, we tend to forget that breath takes time, and then often they become very liberate with tempo. And I would recommend as much practice with metronome. And I actually feel that that's the only way to develop your inner pulse is using metronome, because you get a little bit more cautious and aware of your breathing patterns. So I was just curious what you think, but I would strongly disagree with that, like very strongly, like 99.9% strongly disagree with that. But
it depends. I mean, it's something that I think it needs a little bit more context of what the person was sort of meaning and in what way,
Fair enough. You're always balanced in your answers. I'm always trying to get you to say something more controversial. It's impossible to get.
Oh, do you want me to say something controversial?
Not.
you want me to, I can. I can.
Okay.
Let me talk about violin players and piano players. I'll talk about something controversial.
Talking about violin players, I've been receiving a couple. I've been receiving some requests. Now I asked you whether you know this channel called I think it's called Two Set Violins or Two Violins or something like that. It's two Australian gentlemen who.
Stop right there. Stop right there. Obviously, the only channel that is important is Matonizz.
Yeah. Well,
I don't know of any other channels or anything like that. I don't follow anyone. I don't know any people except Matonizz. That's the only one.
Oh, well, that's the best one, obviously. I didn't even mention because that's self-explanatory. But that being said, apparently they made this parody video where they're side reading some of the orchestral parts and basically just found the parts with a bunch of rest and it's a bunch of playing nothing or like one note or something. I didn't watch the full video, but a bunch of people got very upset and they asked me to make a reply video. Now, first of all, why would you ask a euphonium player to make a reply on orchestral music jokes? I don't know whether any of you noticed, but there's no euphonium in the orchestra.
Yeah, you were telling me before we started the stream. You mentioned like one or two questions we were going to talk about here, and you asked me if I saw this thing. I'm like, no, I didn't see this violin thing, but it's funny though. It's like, yeah, what would you say back as two euphonium players with orchestra music? It's like, okay, let's me and you do a video with our euphonium of playing some euphonium orchestra parts. That we would just
leave
hold
an
our
empty stand,
and not even play.
We don't even have rests because we don't even have parts. But with all fairness, look, it's brass players. They have different problems, different issues they need to focus. So when you look at the texture, I don't feel it's a fair play. We've got some very complicated basics in terms of how we produce sound, etc., etc. So I'm not going to spend much time addressing this. I'm always more bothered. I'm not necessarily all that interested about this channel getting the most clicks. Although that's kind of contradicting all my headlines for the videos. but that being said,
you have some of the worst video titles I've ever seen.
Some of the best.
Some
of the best. You just don't know what you're talking about. Either way, but what I'm trying to do is give some sort of product or information most of the time, and so I'm not going to spend too much time addressing any of these. But that being said, we're going to go to your Q&As. But before we do that, I just feel that Mike's voice is getting slightly deeper, and it seems like his energy levels are dropping. So I think
I had to re-record. It's time to dine. It's time to dine right now.
All right. Okay. Time to dine with Ding. So here's the rules for all the people who are new to the stream. First of all, hit that thumbs up, click subscribe button, and hit the notification bell. Outside of that, we have this thing where Mike gets a little bit hungry as he's thinking and processing all the questions. So he's got a little snack, a little treat per se. And the first person who can name correctly what the treat for today will be will get a free copy of my PDF scale curriculum book. So Mike is going to give you some hints, and please put your answer to the chat, and the first person who will answer correctly will get a free copy of my PDF book. So Mike, what do we have on the table today?
Oh, I have a special treat today. I actually went out for a drive today to
just get a treat for
a few towns over to pick this up. So I'm really excited. Okay. But the treat for today, I will give the first hint, and the first hint is this treat could either be baked or fried. But even though they could either be baked or fried, they're equally delicious.
It's a burger? Is a burger a pizza? Pizza burger?
I would never eat a burger for dining with Ding. It's always candy or a baked good of some sort.
Okay. How about pretzel? No, you're not gonna tell me an answer.
That's not. It's not. It's got to be some type of.
Okay,
Sweet.
I'm not gonna. I guess I actually know the answer, so I'm not gonna, because I might actually spoil it. Okay, so we're gonna wait for the answers to start rolling in, and I'm gonna start counting. Fritter. What is a fritter?
I know what a fritter is, and that person, I can't see the username of the person because I'm looking off a sort of your screen through my screen.
SJ Kylie. SJ Kylie.
But that is very close. That is very close.
Donut.
That is very close still. I can give another hint, though. I can give another hint.
Just a second. Twinkie donut. Twinkie. I'm seeing some Twinkies. Not a Twinkie. Okay. I'm going to count down 10 to 0, and we're going to give another hint. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
This treat has a very tasty spice. That's a very important part of the treat.
So, Ed, is it? I'm seeing Twinkie fritter pie cinnamon roll.
Oh, there it is. Who said it?
It's Casey Desrosiers. I'm probably butchering the surname, so apologies. Casey said cinnamon roll. Is that a cinnamon roll?
It is a cinnamon roll.
All right.
Oh, look how good this thing looks.
I need to. It actually looks pretty delicious.
Goodness.
It looks quite delicious. But
big as my head.
I need to get some victory music for this next time. I'll get some when somebody guesses this. Okay, congratulations to Casey. Casey, please send me an email to euphonium.legends@gmail.com. You can find that email in the description box below. Again, it's euphonium.legends@gmail.com. Congratulations to Casey. Send it to me, and I'll forward you the copy of the scale curriculum book. So congratulations again, and thanks a lot for playing. That being said, let's go to your live questions, and I'm seeing some good questions. Ellen is saying, I would prefer an earlier notice. I was practicing on my euphonium when I saw the stream post. So normally the way this works, I normally give a date at the end of the videos for the stream. So always when you see those Monday videos, check the all the information I give in the outro. I announced that on Monday and set this up an hour ago. So next time, and normally when we start the stream, that's where the YouTube sends the notification, I believe. I'm not exactly sure, but I normally preset them a little bit earlier, but I announced that it will be we will be live 6 p.m. On Monday, so just always pay attention to the end of the videos, but we'll see if we can make an extra notification maybe next time. But the questions, what's your opinion? Jarnell is asking, what's your opinion playing euphonium with braces? My opinion is good luck to you. That'll be my opinion, but with all seriousness, it's a tricky one because you got an extra layer, and we answered that a couple of times, but you got an extra layer between your teeth and gums, which makes the sensation and the way you close the lips very, very complicated. So, and you'll notice when you get pretty good at braces, playing with braces, and once you take it off, it changes completely. So my approach would be try not to be obsessed at developing high register when you're playing with braces. That'll be one thing. You'll notice once, if you've been playing your instrument for a while and you got just braces put on recently, you'll notice that your upper register will drop quite a bit, and sound will probably suffer to some extent because it will be hard to get the same centering on your lips. It's hard. because it's a lot of psychological, it's a big psychological issue. But don't try to recreate the same high register. Look, you have literally an extra layer between your gums and teeth. You're not gonna have same control and ability to apply same quality tension and have perfect centering with it. So try to get better at things like controlling your breathing patterns, timing your breath, playing good in middle register, and all that kind of stuff. Don't be preoccupied at a very stamina and very muscle related techniques like high register and etc. Mike, I know you're eating, but do you want to
Oh yeah, sure.
weigh in?
Yeah, playing with braces, it's possible. It could be a very devastating thing, but I've never had braces ever in my life, so I wouldn't know firsthand. Truth be told, even though I eat a lot of sweets, I've never had one cavity in my life.
Good for you.
And I've never had braces either, but I've had students that have had braces, and some students adapt a little bit easier than other students do. It just depends on the person. Playing the euphonium with braces, sometimes that might be a little bit easier than some of the other instruments, like for example, trumpet or French horn.
Is it even possible?
Oh, sure, yeah. I mean, I've had to play trumpet and French horn with braces.
Yeah, braces.
Sure. Oh yeah, yeah. I've had players play and things like that. And once again, it's just how the person handles it, how their mouth is formed, and all of that. There's so much that could go wrong with that. There's some things that you might be able to do. Like I know of some students that have put like a type of wax over their braces to make it a little bit more comfortable whenever they play.
Never
There's
heard
also
of that.
different types of like caps.
Elaborate on wax part. Don't have a clue what you're talking about.
Yeah, so for especially when they first get them on, you can put a type of wax there that gives it a little bit more of a cushion, so the braces, the metal parts, don't cut into the lips and the different parts of your mouth. So it sort of makes a covering. You put almost sort of like a covering over it that makes it a little bit less painful.
That makes sense. Do we make a braces with special consideration for brass players, or that's not a thing?
I don't think so. I think it's just, I mean, there's different types of braces that you can have in. Like when you think of like the original ones of like the metal, the pieces of metal and things like that, but they have those other Invisalign things where you put in this almost a retainer type thing, and it helps to straighten the teeth instead of actual metal braces. There's various
what
ways.
I used to have. That's what I used to have, because I used to have an underbite when I was a kid. And that's what I had, that little, come on.
My cinnamon roll fell on the floor. No.
Come on, behave
You were talking
yourself.
about, you were talking about underbite. I just went and I took an overbite of my cinnamon roll, and it just all fell apart.
But
we have to end the stream. I'm sad.
No,
I'm sad.
It's not gonna happen. At least not for next 10 or 15 minutes. But basically, I used to have that. I think it takes a little bit longer for your teeth to get corrected with that, but at least you can always take it out and play. So that would be. But again, I would assume for most kids, you're not the person who's making executive decisions in your house. So you'll have to roll with whatever parents will get you. But hopefully this gives you a little bit of idea of how we would approach it.
One final thing.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned this a little bit too. It's take your time. That's my quick answer. Take your time and relax, because depending on how much it's hurting and how much a negative impact it has on your sound or your range when you have the braces, it could be very discouraging. Just try your best with what you can do until and develop other areas of your musicianship until those braces can come off, and then you could get back into the swing of things. You have to hang in there.
Scratch is asking, have you ever played a piece called Currents? Me, not. Mike, you familiar with Currents?
Not by the title.
Okay, me neither. If you want to send me a PDF with the part, I would gladly look at it, but I don't think I've ever played that. I just got accepted. Jacob is asking, I just got accepted in the youth symphonies. There anything I should be wary for? Yes, string players. Heard, especially violin players. Heard they don't like brass players, the rumor is. They make naughty, bad videos. But with all seriousness, it's, if you've never been in as large, because this is as as large of an ensemble as you probably get, as you're gonna get, the perception of the sound, intonation, timing, those will be the most complicated things. Is understanding where you blend in, understanding that the sound and the way, especially if you're rehearsing in a larger venue, that what the tendencies, especially where you're gonna be sitting, because you're gonna be sitting at the back, that your tendency will be to always be a little late because the way the sound travels. So just understanding what actions you need to take to make sure you're in sync, in tune with strings. The intonation is going to be very, very, very different than wind ensemble or brass band. It's going to be much more concert pitch. I personally find so much easier to tune with when playing in symphony orchestra. But at the same time, I'm much more used to playing in brass band or wind ensemble. So it's just understanding that it's going to be the way you're going to be hearing all the parts will be very, very different to whenever, for example, you're listening at a recording from a symphony orchestra. So you'll have to get used to and improve your musicianship a lot. Not only don't necessarily be preoccupied about the texture of a piece, because the texture might not represent how complicated it is to execute the pieces for brass and symphony orchestras. Mike?
Yeah, I think, was this something that a person auditioned to get into? If that's the case, then congratulations for to the person for getting into that ensemble. Just a quick thing that I thought about here in that question would just be to think about the blend and balance of the orchestra, and especially your section, especially if you're a brass player. You need to make sure that you're adjusting to the other groupings of instruments that are around you, so that you can fit your sound in appropriately. I mean, it's real easy to overpower, another woodwind, and it's easy to overpower string instruments as well.
Parker is asking, how do you stay consistent with playing your instrument? Because sometimes he says, I would assume Parker, he or she, not exactly sure, but sometimes
I'll get fired if I don't.
sometimes people lose motivation, and it's interesting. I find that, at least in this aspect, I'm not necessarily the best teacher. When I find it, my students vary a lot in age. I've got students who are over 60 and students who are under 18. And normally motivation is much more relevant with younger players, and that's not a natural. Just because learning how to develop your work ethic is a process, and it's a skill, and it'll become easier the more you do it. At my point, motivation it's not really even like a question. Like, it's very cool when you really want to go and practice, and normally on those days I get better progress and I sound better, but it's more of a functionality for me. So what I used to find motivating when I was a kid is tracking my progress. If I could get better, I would find myself way more likely to practice more if I knew what I was doing, and if I could noticeably track and hear my progress, if I could hear myself getting better. So that was one of the reasons why I used to practice a lot of fast stuff, because tracking your fingers is probably the quickest thing. You can literally hear progress being made within a practice session, whereas tone range takes a little bit of time to develop. So have a consistent routine, and give yourself I always give myself certain rules, and when I'm allowed to not practice, and when I can take a day off. Now normally if I break my leg, I can take a day off. That would be a good excuse for me to take a day off. If I'm tired, that's not a good excuse, because guess what? Half the week I'm tired. So I normally have a set routine and set of exercises that I complete no matter what. No matter what, no matter what time of the day, no matter how much work I had to do that day, I will complete that practice routine. And that's what I suggest younger students as well. Start developing some sort of a structure. Start writing things down and give yourself an opportunity to track things. You'll notice that it's much easier to find yourself, even when you're not necessarily too into practice, just to get yourself to do some stuff and be able to complete a certain set of goals. That can be a motivation in itself. If you're not interested necessarily in practicing, maybe you're interested in completing a set of goals. So those would be a little things. And the more you do it, you won't have this problem for the rest of your life. Once you get past through practicing when you're not necessarily in the mood multiple times, that'll become so much more easy to do as you grow a little bit older. Mike?
When I think about motivation, I actually think about two things. The first thing is just my love of music. I just love music so much. It's such a part of me, and it's been a part of my life for what seems like forever. So I don't know what I would do without it or where I would be without it. I just love it. You know, it's just like breathing in air for me. Yeah, if I don't practice or if I'm not playing, then I just feel like I miss it, just because I love music so much. So that's one of the things I think about that gets me motivated to play, is just my love of music. The second thing is I just want to be successful. You know, if I'm working on something and I want to get better, or I want to accomplish a goal, I just want to be successful with what I'm doing. You know, and I might not always reach my goal. You know, I might not ever get to where I want to be as a player, but I have my goals and the different things at various points in my life. And what motivates me is to just get better and be successful. And whenever you get better and you feel like you're successful, then opportunities tend to present themselves, or things start to get better. You start to get more experience, and you start to get involved in other types of things with the music, and it just keeps getting better and better. So just success. I want to be successful. Whether I get there or not, that's who knows. But and then the love of music.
Yeah, and it's the attitude as well. So there's multiple ways to look at things. For example, I always try to look as much as possible towards the positive side. So when you feel tired, don't think of it as tired. I like thinking, I kind of grew to fall in love with the feeling of being tired, just because it makes me feel like I accomplished something. I know that in order for me to get tired, I have to do something a lot. I have to work the whole day, and you know that you accomplished something. So I never call it tired. That feeling, that physical or the mental tiredness, does not necessarily associate with a negative thing. I treat it, it feels like I accomplished something. So always look for a positive way to look even at some of those mental states where it might not necessarily be usually treated as a good thing for your practice. So if you're feeling a little bit tired, but hopefully that helps. Gavin is asking, are you a fan of DCI? Now, Mike is not a fan of DCI.
Always. We always get this question.
Well, it's a relevant thing, because a lot of my students as well are in the marching bands, and it's I was not a big fan. If you asked me 5 years ago when I moved to States, I wasn't a big fan. I actually started looking at it way more, just because I actually find some of that fascinating, especially when I had some of my first marching experience and realized how much I suck at it, just by walking and then watching some of those kids march in the stadium with like that symmetry and still while playing is like, oh, That's actually pretty impressive. So I actually started, also there's some of the best fails coming from those. People are falling and crashing, and it's, I guess at that time it's probably not funny, but you know, I kind of find it funny. I find a lot of things funny. I guess you probably noticed, but I like it. I'm not following it all that much, but I do enjoy a good DCI video once in a while.
Yeah, I always seem to give it a hard time, but I really appreciate it. I appreciate it for what it is, and there's some great things and some impressive things that come from, you know, drum corps and the presentations that they put on and how exciting they could be, and all of the visuals and the whole thing. It's just something that I'm not physically a fan of. When I was in high school, I had to do marching band because that's what I had to do to participate in like the state festivals and things like that, the districts and the regions and the honors bands and all of that. So I had to be a member of the marching band to participate in the concert band. So I just sort of had to do it, but I never really enjoyed the physical marching aspects. And it just seems like that the DCI stuff and the drum corps thing is just that to the extreme.
It's hilarious because you would run a marathon right before a gig, and most people would think I'm probably joking. But I'm not even joking. You would come in with like hurting knees and tired, and right before a gig.
I've yet to do a full marathon. I've done a handful of half marathons and less distance than that in different races, but it's just different. You know, I don't have to play an instrument when I'm running a half marathon.
That does not seem to make all that. Well, I guess fair enough, fair point. Okay, not gonna elaborate all that much there. I'm more of a kickboxing guy. I like my bag, but I guess you can still kick while playing. I don't know, never tried it. Maybe I should do a video about how to throw a roundhouse kick while playing a C major scale.
I just see your teeth just in pieces everywhere. I don't see that working out.
Fair enough. Maybe I should think that through before trying. Isaac is asking, how do I get above a C above stave? Now, this is a very, very broad question, even though it's a specific question, but the answer would be very, very broad. What I would recommend is I did multiple videos on register on my channel. Check the educational playlist. You'll get a lot of variety of useful tips that I break down in detail. The question is too broad for this, and it's usually a combination of variety of things that will help you. Don't treat it as I need to get that note. Treat it as learn how to control pitch, learn how to control sound, and get all those things better at those things at once, and you'll be able to notice progress. But check some of the educational videos on the high register. You'll find a lot of useful tips there. But I was just reading a funny comment from Marcus, who's saying greetings from Germany. Greetings, by the way. But I just got my attention because he says 2 years ago I played Huapango by Moncayo in the percussion section. The percussionist right next to me counted loudly most of the time to 6. For those who don't know, Huapango is in 6/8, and I don't know whether I'm pronouncing that, by the way, correctly, but it's in 6/8, and he says it was counting out loud. Dotted quarters are about 100 to 120 beats per minute. So I just found that funny, but either way. One of my students is asking, how do I combat playing fatigue? Well, the answer would be just consistent practice. You develop stamina by consistent practice. You cannot compensate stamina by playing a lot in one session. It's staying consistent over and over and over again. These physical elements, they take time to develop. Some of the techniques you can learn quick. this is something you cannot correct quickly. So obviously, there are small things you could do in terms of technical aspects by correct breathing technique, always taking air and using air, not applying too much pressure from your mouth, because that will cut off the blood flow in your lips, as well as learning how to play a little bit more relaxed. Then you'll be using less of this and more of that. And that will help you to extend the stamina. But it's mostly just staying consistent with your practice. Play hour every single day for a couple of months. You'll notice you'll be able to play hour and 20 minutes, hour 40 minutes without necessarily getting overly fatigued. But Mike, anything you would have in mind?
Yeah, too. That's something that needs to be maintained as well. You're talking about the practice routine. It's something that really needs to be maintained all the time. I can notice a big difference in how this impacts my life personally. You know, if we have a normal brass band year where we have a series of concerts, you know, most of the time in the summertime that's when our off season is with the brass band, and we normally pick back up in September. But even whenever you go back in September and you're sitting through the first rehearsal of the brass band, and you have to sit for 2 hours pretty much straight, 2 hours of straight playing, often at very loud dynamic levels, you can just notice that it's hard to get through, and you notice the different types of ways that the fatigue can hit you. And it's extreme sometimes, but it's hard though, because it's hard to recreate that brass band experience when you're not in the brass band. So when you're on break for a few months, and you don't have that constant playing, then your muscles start to weaken, and they're not as strong, and you can't play as much as you would like. Your stamina is not there. But it's like it shocks you. It's like it smacks you in the face whenever you get back into those situations, like I mentioned with the brass band. But after a few rehearsals and you start to get into the concerts, you're sort of back, and you have that stamina built up again, because you're training yourself to get back to that area, in that place you were, that level of playing. So you have to maintain the practice routine.
Okay, so we're going to read a couple more questions, and this is going over an hour, so we're going to wrap this up soon. Thanks so much for everyone who tuned in. We're going to, again, read a few more questions. Don't forget to give this video a like and subscribe if you haven't already. We would really appreciate that, and that would help out the channel. Thanks to everyone who participated in the chat. We're going to do more of these live streams. We're back on track, so these are going to be coming out weekly. So this stream, we spend a little bit more time answering the questions, but let's get into a couple more questions, and we're going to wrap this up. I was looking at a good question. Okay, Tom is saying, I play euphonium. I've been playing euphonium for 10 years, and I have Jupiter and have problems in the high range. Do you have any tips, or should I buy a new mouthpiece? Definitely not a new mouthpiece. For those who know Mike, he's not a big mouthpiece guy. Now, if you play the same Jupiter as I do, one thing about Jupiter horns, and I haven't made a review. I haven't made many reviews. In my opinion, it's Yamaha 842 and Jupiter XO are the best band instruments in terms of the tone they produce, the intonation. It's not necessarily the easiest instrument to play upstairs. So again, I would recommend just working on your technique necessarily, than bothering yourself too much about playing high. But you'll notice some of the instruments are just a little bit more off-centered, and especially with Jupiters, what you have to do is at the top, normally what happens, you have to be really controlled with the space in your aperture, the centering, how you get there. So once the resistance becomes higher at the top register, our natural tendency, just because we're afraid our lips will open up and we're going to lose the pitch or the sound, is to clamp on the lips. Okay, because in order for you to play higher, the space will have to be very centered, and it's not going to be a large space. For me, one of the most important things that I work on a high register with my students is controlling that space. So for example, I can completely shut my lips just by staying neutral like this. My lips are completely sealed, and I'm not necessarily working any of these muscles. Now, when you play high, in order for you to keep that small little straw-like space in your aperture, you'll have to work some of these muscles, but you don't have to work nearly as much as you think. So what I'm always trying to get people to do is get to that space with as little effort as possible and control it as much as possible. So there's a specific set of exercises. Again, I've got a lot of that covered in my range exercises, but with some of the instruments, just especially the high Bs, some of that stuff, they're super off-centered on euphoniums. Just it requires a lot of control. Don't expect that you can just force and blow your way through, because you have to be subtle with your airstream there. Not only be strong, but be subtle with your airstream. Mike, anything you would like to add to that?
Yeah, just a couple of things. It's hard to get from this question too of like how high this person is talking about. It's tough to answer the question, and your mind can go in many different ways because you don't know specifically exactly what the person is mentioning. But along the lines with the mouthpiece, if you do have an opportunity to try out a few mouthpieces and see if there's a better response for you with them, I totally agree with what you had to say about working out the technical aspects and trying to develop the range. That's very important. If you do have an opportunity, though, to get to a music store or something like that and maybe try out a few different mouthpieces to see if there's a different response for you up in your higher range, and if that makes you feel more comfortable, then all the power to you, and maybe try one of those other ones and switch to it. It depends too of I mean, there's people too that sometimes, and as sad as it sounds, that sometimes people with how their mouth is formed or their face structure and other things, that the higher range sounds or lower range sounds or anything, they just might not be achievable just because of physical aspects. I don't know if that's what the person's case could be. That's why it's tough with that question.
And look, it's almost like when you get to good. I can't remember which coach used to say that, but it was a famous running coach where he said, I cannot make anyone fast. I can make them faster, but I cannot make them fast. So some people are naturally, for example, one of our colleagues, Jeff Nicodemus, who plays on soprano, just perfectly symmetrical teeth. His embouchure never slides. It's always perfectly centered, and he does it with such a little effort. Like, I would never be able to grab a soprano trumpet and do it like that. So it's physical, but bear in mind, it can always be improved. No matter where, you might not have the craziest register, but you can develop a great register just by working, and it will vary for everyone, but just it can be improved. So check some of those videos. SJ Kyle is asking, would you consider a senior discount on your Patreon page? I'm on a fixed, very tight budget. Yes, email me at euphonium.legends at gmail.com. Again, it's euphonium.legends at gmail.com, and I'll figure something for you, friend. Michael is saying, hey guys, trumpet player here. I have a bit of an issue with with working my mouthpiece around my embouchure, depending on the register I'm in. Would you guys have any advice, exercises to try and help? Exercises, well, I'll follow up with that in a little bit. I would recommend you not working around your way with the mouthpiece. Look, your mouthpiece will most likely sit based on your teeth, based on your teeth structure. When you try to manipulate, you're just going to try and develop a superficial technique that you're or unlikely to be able to control later on when playing in the piece. So you'll notice that if you slip your mouthpiece one way or angle it a little bit, it might help you to squeeze out a higher note. But you'll notice whenever you play that in a context in the piece, you're unlikely to apply that technique just because it's so natural, and it will be hard for you to control that. I would recommend working your way and just developing your range and your playing as close to blowing air as possible. When I buzz and I play, the sensation that I get from my playing versus me blowing air is so close, and it's developable for everyone. So you can work on your technique rather than try to angle out your way with a mouthpiece. You have way more leverage into working and developing control of your pitch through airstream rather than adjusting the tension or the mouthpiece angle. It can be a useful tool. So for example, if you look at the string instrument, they have a couple of ways to adjust their pitch. They have frets, they have the tuning pegs, they can bend the pitch as well. So two of them are very, very limited. You don't normally change your pitch by tuning the pegs, although I've seen players do that once they break the string. But that would not be a very functional way of changing your pitch. The same thing with bending. You can only bend the notes so much, and it's one of the techniques, but the main technique is frets. So our frets is the airstream, ability to control the airstream, which is being done with the tongue. So treat your range as a whistle. The closer you can get to your playing to that and learn how to control the tension or decrease the tension and rely on your airstream, the better the chances of controlling register you'll have. And those two money octaves that you have on trumpet or euphonium, vast majority of that you can do with just really being diligent with your air. When you go to your super crazy registers, yeah, there's a little tricks and etc. But I would assume that's not the case in your case. So just try to learn how to control the airstream and decrease the tension as you play. Develop a good free bus. Free bus numero uno exercise. One of the favorite range and strengthening and tone exercises that I use with all my students, and I always get a fantastic result from that. Mike.
Yeah, just very quickly, just to mention, yeah, you always do such a good job of answering questions. Just to add to that, everyone's mouthpiece placement is different based on your body and your face. What I always try to think is to place my mouthpiece where whenever I buzz into it, it gets the most resonant sound, and I try to keep it in that position. I don't do a lot to move it around or adjust that sort of formation or that placement, because a lot could go wrong and a lot can take away from that resonant sound that you want to have and that you're blowing through in that mouthpiece and then into your horn. I rely, just like you said, on the airstream and how you're using the airstream to get your range. The direction of your airstream and the air column and things like that. The movement of the tongue, like you had said. You can change a lot with the placement of the mouthpiece, and you could do a lot of harm by moving. Yeah, it might get you to get a higher sound to come out, but what's really your tone quality in that instance? Are you sacrificing bad sound to get a high sound out, whereas you can probably get that high sound with changing the direction of your air, the angle of your air, not the angle of the mouthpiece necessarily.
Yeah. That's what I recommend. And again, changing angles on trumpet is way easier than tuba or euphonium. But again, I would not recommend develop a solid technique before you start relying on these accessory techniques, like which lip do you put more pressure on, etc. Eventually, you don't have as much control over this as you think. Try to get Try to get to something more relatable, which is controlling your airstream. We all breathe Now, developing and controlling your airstream is never easy, but that's something way more relatable than to think, is my lip closing half a millimeter more, or etc. You're never gonna have as much control there as you think you have. So hopefully that answers that question. The last question, Mike, can you sing Hallelujah for us?
I have to have the orchestra backing me up.
Okay. Thanks to everyone who participated. Thanks to everyone who tuned in and joined the live stream. Hopefully you got some useful information today. Again, do us a favor and give this video a like. You'll be able to re-watch this on YouTube, as later on it'll be uploaded. And with that, we hope you all have a great rest of the week and a good start to your next week. We're going to be back with hopefully a full 8-piece new arrangement on Monday, which I think is going to sound, don't spoil it which piece is going to be, but we have a really good piece coming out, so hopefully it'll be ready by Monday. It's a lot of work. Mike did a lot of trombone work today, but for those who complained that my octet, Drew's octet arrangements did not have trombone or horn, guess what? It's coming. Plus a special instrument, per se, replacement instrument on a second movement. So just teasing a little bit, but it's going to be a very cool piece on Monday. Hopefully, I'm really working hard on making it on having it finished by Monday. Again, with that being said, keep an eye for it. Thanks so much for everyone who tuned in. Have a great rest of the week, and we'll see you with more streams next week. Take care, everyone.